Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast. It is just Chris from the Formula One Bros with you today for our next Grand Prix view episode. And this week, we are previewing the 2024 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, which is coming up this weekend. But before we get there, a big announcement in the driver market today. We got some news that just dropped this morning, and it is that Alex Albon is staying at Williams on a long-term contract. This comes after there was much speculation around him in the driver market pre-Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari move. I mentioned on a previous podcast that it kind of felt like he was going to be a sort of linchpin or catalyst for a lot of the dominoes falling in the driver market. Since then, the market has gotten a lot more locked up, and I believe that Williams was offering the best outcome for him, and that also this is a huge show of faith in what Williams has going on and planned for the coming years. In a statement released on their website, Williams says, quote, "We can today announce that Alex Albon has committed his long-term future to Williams Racing. The Thai driver has signed a multi-year contract extension, which takes the partnership into the new era of the Formula One regulations and demonstrates a shared belief in the upward trajectory of the team." In response to the signing, Alex Albon says in that same statement on Williams' website, "I'm incredibly happy to be remaining with Williams Racing and continue to work with such a talented and dedicated team of people. It has been a difficult start to the year, but since joining Williams, we have made significant progress together, and I've seen huge changes happening behind the scenes to take us back to the front of the grid. This is a long-term project that I really believe in and want to play a key role in, which is why I have signed a multi-year contract. The journey will take time, but I am confident we are building the right team to move forward and achieve great things in the year to come." So there's a lot in there, and this to me is a huge show of faith in what is happening and is largely based off of what is happening off track. This is not, I would imagine that this is not based on what is happening on track, considering Williams is pointless so far in this season, and they were off scoring points as early as Australia last year. So, it's been a difficult start to the season. They had a huge overhaul over the winter, in which James Vowles said that they were going to break everything. It kind of seems like one of those off seasons that they had this year and a start to the season where they're having to take several steps backwards in order to set them up for success to be able to take many steps forward in the future. So to me, this is all about what is happening off track. It seems like the aim here is to target 2026 and the new regulation changes, and that all of the work that the team is doing is to set them up for success in the next era of Formula One. This contract extension tells me that they are making Alex a central and integral part to the team's growth, development, and work towards the 2026 regulation changes. And I bet you that work maybe starts with the contract extension and probably likely has already started. And I imagine that after signing this contract, Alex Albon is going to be directly impacting the 2026 car and working towards that. So, I talked a little bit about how it's kind of softened, the driver market has kind of softened. That's because, Mercedes seems like they're pretty set in stone on Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Lance Stroll is always going to be at Aston Martin, and then you had Fernando Alonso re-signing for Aston Martin, which takes away that prospect. And I said at the beginning of the season that I thought Alex Albon was going to be landing at Aston Martin. That hasn't happened yet, and it will not happen. Red Bull seem very convinced that they're going to be taking up another option for Sergio Perez. And honestly, I don't know that that's a place that Alex Albon is going to want to go. I think a huge reason why Alex Albon signs this deal with Williams is because he's going in as the undisputed team leader, number one driver. There's also probably a little bit of loyalty there because Williams gave him his F1 career back after the Red Bull demotion. And I just think that Red Bull have a lot of other things going on. There's, if not Sergio Perez, there's potentially Carlos Sainz. So I just don't think that there's a whole lot of room there. Ferrari is taken up. McLaren is now taken up, and there's nowhere else for him to go. So I think it was, a safe option. At this point, anywhere else kind of seems like a lateral move. You take a look at Haas; they're kind of a mess right now, and you don't know what you're going to be walking into there. Is Kevin Magnussen staying? Is Kevin Magnussen leaving? And I doubt somebody like Alex Albon is going to be making that decision without knowing that. I think because, again, this is going to be about being a team leader and being a number one driver. And if they keep a hold of Kevin Magnussen is going to be their number one. Taking a look at Sauber, Nico Hülkenberg, that's easy. They're going to be their number one. I bet you they're also trying to get Carlos Sainz. And Alpine, they're with those two drivers. I don't see any change happening at Alpine. I doubt, if he's not going back to Red Bull, he's certainly not going back to Visa Cash App Racing Bulls. So, plus they have their own things that they need to figure out. And I think if they don't keep Ricciardo or Tsunoda, they're going to be bringing in Liam Lawson. So, it just kind of, though I say it's a move out of necessity because there's nowhere else for him to go, I think this is the best move for Alex Albon, and I do think that it's a show of faith for Williams. It's an intent that Williams, has goals and has aspirations, and they want to be able to do that. They're not going to be able to pay a Carlos Sainz type person the amount of money that they're going to want to do that. So, and Alex Albon, being at Williams, just like with George Russell there, is not an indictment of any lack of ability behind the wheel. We know what Alex Albon can do. Alex Albon has been incredible taking that car to places that it shouldn't be. And, when Alex Albon signed with Williams, we all kind of were, the basis of his success largely in that first year was, can he be that George Russell type person? And honestly, I believe he has been. I think he picked up the George Russell baton, and he's still carrying it. And I think he's doing an incredible job. So it's very well warranted. And I think that, if Williams really does seek to achieve great things in the future, which everything that I'm hearing from James Vowles says that they are, and they're really working hard to build towards that. I mean, the stories coming out of Williams over the offseason that there are people sleeping at the factory to get the things done and to even have a car ready to go for the first day of testing, because they had completely changed over the way that they were managing the parts of the car. There currently is a huge backlog of development. So, I do think that, this is a multi-year deal. They talked a lot in the press release about the 2026 and about the new era of Formula One. And it kind of seems like that's where they're going. So, which I'm really excited for Alex Albon. I'm really excited for Williams. And I think it's going to be a really, really great decision and a great pairing for the two of them. Now, who pairs up alongside Alex Albon? No idea. I don't know that it's going to be Logan Sargent. At this point, I'm willing to bet that it's Andrea Kimi Antonelli, given that, he's going to need to really turn around his F2 season. He's had him and Ollie Behrman both have had a very difficult start to the year. So he's really going to have to turn around his F2 campaign if he wants a shot at the Mercedes seat. So it might be Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Other than that, I don't really know where they're looking. So it might be Logan Sargent. I'm not really sure. But I think who is partnering Alex Albon, that is going to be a ways from now. So that's the major news of the day. Now on to what is ahead, which is the 2024 Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. It's a Grand Prix at Imola, back for the first time since 2022. Remember that they were scheduled to go in 2023, but due to the horrendous and extensive flooding in the region, in the Emilia Romagna region, the race last year was canceled. First of all, my thoughts are with everybody that is, living in the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. I'm sure the rebuilding process over the past year not only was very challenging, it may not be done yet. So my thoughts are with everybody there. And I am wishing you all nothing but the best. And I hope that Formula One can be a bright spot in the recovery from those floods, and that Formula One being back in the region will be a welcome presence. So I'm going to kind of do this a little bit in different parts, because Imola has had an interesting Grand Prix history with Formula One. It started in 1980 as the Italian Grand Prix. It was the site of the 1980 Italian Grand Prix. It was the Italian Grand Prix only once in 1980. After that, it was named the San Marino Grand Prix, which Imola is not in the country of San Marino. San Marino is a country or a state within Italy that is kind of like a city-state. From what I understand, please, somebody from Italy or who is more versed in European geopolitics, tell me. But it kind of seems like it's a principality or a state, kind of like Hong Kong or Monaco, something like that. But it is a separate country. It is its own thing, and it was named the San Marino Grand Prix, though not being in San Marino. And then it was San Marino Grand Prix all the way up until its last Formula One Grand Prix in 2006. After that, there was a hiatus, and it came back in 2020 in an effort to fill the COVID-shortened schedule. And it came back in 2020 as the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, because we already had the Italian Grand Prix. So it was the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, named after the region in which the track resides. But it also has a very interesting name. We'll get into that. So this Grand Prix will be taking place at the Autodromo Enzo Edino Ferrari, which is more commonly known as Imola. People say the Imola Grand Prix, something like that. The Grand Prix racing has been taking place at Imola for a long time, but in its current fixture, it is taking place since 2020. Prior to that, Imola was off the F1 schedule for about a decade and a half and previously raced under the San Marino Grand Prix moniker. Because of all of this, I'll be kind of discussing this in two parts. I'll be discussing the San Marino Grand Prix history and the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, while also talking about Imola in general. So first, the race this year is being held on the weekend of May 17th through 19th. It's a part of a doubleheader with Monaco, which is taking place in its traditional spot in the calendar, which will be, for Americans, the Sunday of Memorial Day, a part of what I believe is one of the greatest days in motorsporting, in the motorsporting calendar, which is the Monaco Grand Prix in the morning, Indianapolis 500 in the afternoon, and the Coke 600 in the evening, which is the NASCAR race at Charlotte. But focusing on this, it's the week before, and the Grand Prix is called, brace yourselves, the full title is the Formula One MSC Cruises Gran Premio del Made in Italy e del Emilia Romagna 2024. I know the Italian pronunciations I probably got totally wrong, but that is the full name. This race will be contested over 63 laps at the 4.909 kilometer circuit, which features 19 turns, one DRS zone down the pit straight. The current lap record is, for Imola in its current layout is held by Lewis Hamilton in his formidable W11 in 2020 with a time of 1 minute 15.484. Currently, all time at Imola, currently Didier Pironi, Patrick Tambay, Elio De Angelis, Riccardo Patrese, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, David Coulthard, Ralf Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton all have one win at the circuit. Nelson Piquet, Nigel Mansell, Damon Hill, and Max Verstappen all have 2 wins. Alain Prost and the great Ayrton Senna have 3 wins each. And Michael Schumacher tops the list with a whopping 7 victories at the track, 1 with Benetton, the other 6 with Ferrari, making Ferrari by far the winningest constructor. Michael Schumacher also has the most fastest laps, the most laps led, the most wins. It's like almost most pole positions. It's like every single stat that you can have, Michael Schumacher. This is Michael Schumacher's track. He is the king, and I'm very excited for Formula One to be back after a year's hiatus. So that is kind of a little bit of the stats going from previous. Again, we didn't race in 2023. The 2022 race and the 2021 race were both won by Max Verstappen. The 2021 race featured, it was a brilliant moment on the first lap between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton in their title battle, which one of the first controversial moments of the championship when Max Verstappen pushed Lewis Hamilton off the track. He had won the corner. He was ahead at the apex, won the corner, and Lewis Hamilton didn't back out of it, was forced off the track, and Max Verstappen didn't look back. Last year, or not last year, sorry, 2022, Max Verstappen won comfortably. And 2020 was the first time back in 6 years, and that was won by Lewis Hamilton in a dominant performance. So for me, I grew up watching Formula One in the Michael Schumacher era. James and I both. We talk about it all the time. So for me, when Imola was announced to come back onto the calendar in 2020, we were ecstatic. So excited. It's a great track. It's a little bit smaller than, it's a little bit, I think I don't want to say too small, but it's definitely a lot smaller, and it's a lot more challenging to overtake with this new, bigger, heavier generation of Formula One cars. But it is always a thrilling race. It's so cool to go back to. It's one of those races that no matter what happens, I always enjoy the racing, and the race being there, because it is such an iconic track. It is so important to the history of Formula One. I feel that way about Spa, Monza, Brazil, so, Australia, those are some of the races, just to name a few off the very top of my head, that I'm just really excited about. Of course, we cannot talk about Imola, the San Marino Grand Prix, and the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix without talking about Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger, who both passed away on the same weekend in 1994. Roland Ratzenberger crashed in qualifying and succumbed to his injuries, and then in the Grand Prix, both of these happened at the Tamburello curve, which now is the Tamburello chicane, turns 2, 3, 4. It used to be one long curve through, and that is where Ayrton Senna went off, and he crashed and ultimately would lose his life there as well. We cannot talk about Emilia Romagna, Imola, San Marino without that history. That is a year that Michael Schumacher did end up winning that race. They did not know it at the time when the Grand Prix was finished that Ayrton had passed away or was not doing well in the hospital. There was no celebration after the race win. Michael Schumacher did win that race. It was in his first season at Benetton in it was his first championship season in 94 for Benetton. And so, we can't talk about it because that is a huge part of that history, and it marred the history of Imola for a little bit. They after that they went under, the track went under a huge reconfiguration. Now Tamburello is a chicane instead of one big curve. And they did a lot to change the layout. The layout has changed several times and was changed most recently in the early 2000s to what it currently is. But it's just one of those things where you can't talk about that race without talking about that. And obviously we will always remember the legacy of those two men in Formula One. And what they've left for us and what this track means. And it's really touching now that we've been going back ever since we've been going back, we've been going back filled with a grid of people who never raced against those two, against Ayrton Senna or Roland Ratzenberger. When they continued racing for a couple years after, everybody had raced with those guys. And now the grid is filled with people that grew up watching and idolizing those people, particularly Senna. And so I think the most touching thing for me in terms of remembering the legacy of those drivers is seeing them honor Ayrton every time we go back to that. There's a statue of him in Tamburello that almost all of the drivers go and pay their respects to. And that is really cool for me to see, I think, now that we're going back to that race. And then looking back at the history, obviously, some of the most memorable moments, I think for me, I remember watching live the 2005, the amazing battle between Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso would ultimately go on to win the 2005 Grand Prix, but it was a titanic battle between those two, and I think served. When we look back at the 2005 championship between Michael Schumacher and Fernando Alonso, that is one of those moments that defined the championship. That race was one of those moments that defined that championship. And I remember watching that live and just like absolutely floored with what was happening. It was crazy. Of course, it was 2005, so I was probably 4th or 5th grade, so I wasn't, that's year 5 or 6 for British for European folks in primary school. But 2005, I was 9 years old, so I didn't really recognize what was going on. But the racing between Fernando Alonso and Michael Schumacher was incredible. It was so much fun to watch. It was so cool to see. And looking back on that championship, that moment serves as a moment that kind of defines that championship. I think about, like, when you look back at the great title battles, or the great championships in the past, you think of, 2021, you think of, the Italian Grand Prix or the British Grand Prix. In 2012, you think of how there were 7 different winners in the first 7 races. You think about Fernando Alonso winning in Malaysia, holding off Sergio Perez. And in 2010, you think of Dubis Weltmeister, the 2010 Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. You think of the 2010, or going back to 2012, you think of Brazil. 2008, you think of, is that Glock? There are these moments in every championship that define what that is, in every championship battle that define that moment. In 2007, it's, by our calculations, you've won the championship by 1 point. Or Canada, Lewis Hamilton's first win. You think about those moments, and for me, 2005 San Marino is that moment of that championship. And also, because it was Michael Schumacher, it would ultimately be Michael Schumacher's last. It almost kind of represents a changing of the guards almost. Fernando Alonso was the young, new prospect. He had only been in Formula One. That would have been his 4th season in F1. Michael Schumacher had been in F1 since 1991. So it almost kind of also represented a changing of the guards between, the old guard and the new generation, almost kind of like what 2021 was, the old generation, and the new, the old guard versus the new generation. And every generation of F1 kind of has that moment. And to me, that is it. That is it. So that to me is one of the most memorable. And I remember watching it live, and I was just completely enthralled, heartbroken that Michael didn't win the race, but completely enthralled in that. And I've loved that race ever since. Well, we are just about running out of time, so that's a very brief overview of the history of that. There's it's such a historic track. There's so much. We could do a full episode on each race of Imola's history. You could do so much with the history, but we have to talk about the previewing what we're here for, previewing the 2024 race. Again, like I said, we're going back to Imola after a 1-year hiatus, after last year's was canceled due to the flooding, which I'm super excited to go back. And the big thing here is that Red Bull have been dominant all season, but McLaren are coming off of a victorious weekend in Miami, a weekend in which they had upgrades. Lando Norris had all the upgrades. Oscar Piastri only had 50% of the upgrades and is due to have 100% of the upgrades for Imola. So they're going to be freshly upgraded. Ferrari are bringing a huge upgrade package into this weekend that they believe now will set them up for the season where they'll be at a point where they can, Fred Vasseur has said that they believe that they'll be at a point where they can race Red Bull for victories every single weekend here on out for the remainder of the season. It's that big. They estimate it to be about 0.3 of a second, and Ferrari are right around 0.3 of a second off on race pace from Red Bull. So that's huge. If that rings true, Ferrari, I don't see why Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull, all 6 of those drivers, all 3 teams have a shot. I don't see why they don't have a shot at victory. I think Ferrari are poised to win. McLaren are coming off of a great weekend, and Red Bull, are looking to bounce back. So it'll be really interesting to see. That's the biggest thing I think that we're going to be following going into the weekend is where do the top 3 now stack up? And they, because of all these upgrades, because of the how much closer, it seems McLaren has gotten to Red Bull and how much closer Ferrari are expected to get because of these upgrades. It kind of seems like that group, that top 3, are kind of solidifying themselves as a kind of top tier, and then it's kind of everybody else behind them. Looking further down the field, Aston Martin has, they were off the pace. They were behind the RBs and Haas in Miami. So they're going to need to bounce back because they're 5th right now in the championship behind Mercedes. So they need to fight back. Can Haas continue its consistency? Can VCarb continue its consistency? So it's all up there. It's all lots of questions still to be asked, lots of jostling around in the pecking order. But the biggest thing is following the upgrades from McLaren and Ferrari, how they're going to do, how close are they going to be to Red Bull, and can Ferrari take it to Red Bull. And the reason why I'm mentioning that so much is not only because I'm a Ferrari fan, because obviously I love Ferrari, but it's a home race for Ferrari. They do well at this track. They're the most successful constructor at this track. In the past couple years, they've done really well at these high downforce, low speed tracks. You think of Monaco, they've had a shot to win the past couple years. So I really do think that Ferrari are in a really good position to take it to Red Bull. So it will be interesting to see. And that is about all the time we have. If we miss something or there's something that you want to hear regarding to the history of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, please let us know down in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow us along, and we will be back after the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix to review the 2024 edition of the race. Until then, take care.